Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to grecochess, my chess YouTube channel. This is Harry Lausaneziris, and today I'm going to share with you a rated tournament game I played yesterday night at the Danny Kopec Swiss Memorial Tournament. Last week, you may remember, I showed you round number 1 where I started with a loss, and now I'm going to show to you round number. First of all, let's see once again the location, this beautiful church that you see here on your screen. It's located in Floral Park, New York, Nassau County, just east of New York City. And now the announcement. It's hosted by the Queen's Chess Club. It is I am Danny Kopec Memorial Swiss. 4 rounds. Round number 1 was May 23rd. Yesterday night was May 30, and the next 2 rounds are scheduled for June 6 and 13. My opponent with the white pieces is Andrew Valen with a rating of 1327, and he's in the 78th percentile. Compare with my numbers, my rating is 1554 and my percentile is 85.9. This means that according to these numbers, I'm the favorite. I'm supposed to win. And we are going now to the analysis board of chess.com and see what actually happened. Andrew with the white pieces, he starts with a pawn from d2 to d4. Here you're going to see on this part of the board, what does the computer think? What is the evaluation and what are the best possible moves of the opponent? It says book move, which means that this move is well known in theory, has been exhaustively analyzed. 0.23 means at this point, the computer believes my opponent has the advantage of 23% of a pawn. I reply symmetrically. Knight goes from b1 to c3. My knight goes to f6. We try to control the center. Bishop goes to f4 and becomes a London bishop. It is very dangerous, controls some very important squares, e5, d6, and especially c7. If I'm not careful, knight goes to b5 and threatens c7, and not only the pawn, but a fork, because simultaneously king at e8 and rook at a8 are attacked. In order to avoid it, pawn goes to c6, so knight cannot go to b5 any longer. Andrew pushes the e-pawn to e3, and by doing so, the light-colored bishop is free now. Until now, everything is a book move. And now I start deviating from theory with my bishop going from c8 to g4. It threatens the queen. Queen cannot take it because the knight will take the queen. He stops it with intercepting with the bishop. And now my bishop is attacked twice and defended only once. So I need to do something, exchange bishops. I push my pawn to e6 and thus liberating my dark-colored bishop. Andrew develops the knight to f3. And now my queen goes to b6 and threatens the pawn at b2. Keep in mind that the knight at c3 is not defended. So if I take it, he cannot just put his rook at b1 and be happy that he's threatening my queen, because my queen is going to grab the knight at c3 immediately. But if the knight was defended, then I would have to think where to put my queen, perhaps on a3, and then knight takes b7. And while my queen is hiding at the edge of the board, his knight is controlling very crucial squares near my king. These are things one needs to think about. Rook goes to b1 and saves the pawn. And now I take my bishop and dark color bishop, send it to b4 and threaten the knight at c3, because if he takes it back with the pawn, queen takes the rook and I'm ahead in material. But he'll not allow it. He castles, and by doing so, if I try the same thing, then at the end his rook will take my queen. What do? I castle. I'd have to do it at some point. Why not now? His knight goes to e5 and is centralized and controls some very crucial squares, including d7. Now, if these two knights did not appear on my side, then there would be a fork, because my queen at b6 and rook at f8 would be under attack. Queen goes back to d8, one more resource to control the d7 square. He threatens my bishop with pawn from a2 to a3. And now the bishop goes all the way back to e7. Why? Because if it went to a5, for example, it would be attacked a second time. Andrew continues the attack on the queen side with pawn going to b4, but by doing so, his knight at c3 is unprotected. Currently, there's no way to attack it, but this might change any moment. My knight goes from b8 to d7, hoping to exchange the knight or at least make it go away. We exchange and now have two ways to take it, either with the queen or with the other knight. The computer prefers with the other knight, but I decided with the queen, so I both control the squares b7 and e4. Although they are not currently attacked and they are defended, one must think in advance what could happen in the future, and that is why I try to control them as early as possible. Now Andrew decides to start expanding on the king side. Pawn goes from f2 to f3, controlling once again the e4 square. This is an inaccuracy, later we'll see why. And I decide to start expanding on the queen side. Pawn goes to a5. If he takes it, rook takes the pawn, and the a3 pawn is in danger. If he doesn't take it, like what happened now, exchange, exchange, and my rook controls the a file. Now my rook that's already controlling it goes to a3 to attack the knight. I start having the initiative, which means that I'm the one that is threatening and Andrew is the one that is defending. The computer doesn't like it, considers it a mistake. Well, perhaps. Bishop goes back to d2 to help the knight. So now he has defended the knight, but he has to continue worrying about it. And now I see the opportunity. Pawn takes here at e4. And he has two ways to take it back, either with the knight to the pawn. He cannot take it to the queen because then my knight will take the queen. But no matter how he does it, look what's happening. He takes the knight, so he doesn't have to worry about the knight being attacked. And now queen takes d4 with a check. King goes to h1. And now rook goes to d8 to threaten the bishop. Of course, currently I attack it twice, it's defended twice. But if he does nothing, exchange rooks, exchange knights, and the queen takes the bishop. At this point, as you may see, my advantage has become quite large. From the moment that my pawn was able to take at e4, my advantage and take back and then the check, my advantage is more than 2 pawns. He defends his bishop with the rook going from f1 to d1. Now that I'm ahead, why not exchange? Why does he take it with a pawn? Because otherwise I would exchange queens. And when you're ahead, the more you exchange, the higher your advantage becomes. But now the problem is that his e-pawn is what's called isolated. There are no pawns at the d or the f, the neighboring files, to come to assist it if necessary. It has to be defended by pieces. Now my queen is worried about a discover, meaning if my opponent could put, for example, his bishop at g5, it would be a double threat. Both my queen would be under attack, and also my bishop would be under attack. In order to avoid any such possibility, or perhaps any other discover that I may not be able to see, queen goes to e5. He moves his rook to f1. And I take full control of the a file by moving my rook to a8. Now his bishop goes to f4. Now the queen is under threat because if I take it, the rook will take my queen, and out of all the squares that the queen can access, there are only two safe squares, c3 and d4. Computer thinks that c3 is the best. In any case, I put it on d4. His rook goes to d1 once again to attack my queen. You understand that even though I have an advantage next to pawn and a better position, all I need is one mistake, either lose my queen because I left it to be taken, or because its attack has nowhere to go, and everything can change. Rook goes now to b6. Computer would rather have it go to b4, but then rook goes to b1 and the pawn at b7 is lost. Not only that, now the computer believes that all my advantage has disappeared. We're 0.00. Rook goes to c7, threatens my bishop, and things become very dangerous because the rook, even if my bishop could leave as it's going to do, then the pawn f7 could be under attack, and who knows what else. My bishop is going to go somewhere. Why not grab the pawn on b4, and I have a much larger advantage. In fact, the computer believes currently that my decision is bad, it's a miss, and my opponent now has advantage 1.15. Let's go and see what's going to happen. My opponent will use his rook to take at f7. Now I cannot take the rook with my king because bishop goes to e3, discover check, and I lose my queen. Bishop now goes to c3. By doing so, of course, my opponent has minimized the disadvantage from 2 pawns down to 1. Bishop goes to c3, and his bishop now goes to d6. You see that there is a double threat. Both my rook at a3 is under attack, and also if I'm not careful, rook goes to f8, rook takes it, and this is checkmate. I have only one move to save myself, as you can see, but it's a good one. Rook goes to a1. And now I'm ahead. It's a great move, and ahead by more than 1 pawn. My opponent wants to avoid any backrank issues. Pawn goes to h3. And myself, in order to minimize any such chance. Now you may not see that if there was not for the pin, opponent could checkmate. My opponent could put his rook here, rook takes it, but now the second rook is pinned and cannot move. Only this pin saves my position. And in order to minimize the chances of any such disaster, I am going to change the rook. Opponent takes it back with the rook, because if he takes the queen, rook goes here and pins the queen, and queen is lost. I continue these pins so that I can survive and I'm not threatened with checkmate. Opponent decides to exchange. And now the opponent is going to push his pawn from e4 to e5. At that time, what I was afraid is put the queen here, f1, and threaten both taking my bishop and checkmate at f8. If I push my bishop back to f6, then the pawn would move to e5 and the bishop would have to move, and still the checkmate is a possibility. This is why if he put his queen here, I would let him take my bishop and would attack his bishop. But nothing of that happened because my opponent made a mistake. And it's a mistake that enhances my advantage. Still, I need to worry what if the queen goes here and threatens checkmate, but now I have the following option. First of all, I do a check, although that was not necessary. I check, his king goes to h2, and then bishop. And at this moment, in order to avoid any stories with my opponent's queen and bishop, pawn goes to h6. By doing this, although the computer thinks a mistake, I avoid any possibility of back rank. Even if the queen somehow ends at f8, it's not a checkmate any longer. Queen goes now to f3, threatens the check at f8, but now it is a blunder. And my advance is used because now it's no checkmate threat. And I play the third best possible move according to the computer. Bishop goes to d4. My computer would like me to take the pawn at c2, but I prefer to start immediately the threat. Computer says it is a miss. But still I have more than 2 pawns of advantage. My opponent doesn't check anyway, but now my king has a place to go, to h7. Queen goes to f4 to threaten the bishop. Now the bishop goes to g1, check. The king cannot go to h1 because it is covered check. Not only takes a queen, my bishop will go in fact to f2 and then a couple of moves later checkmate. But instead king goes to g3. Queen goes to e1 check again. King goes to g4. Queen goes to e2. My opponent places his queen on f3. What will happen if we exchange queens? Same color bishops, which is an advantage for the side that is ahead, that is me, but none of my pawns is a passed pawn. Victory most likely, but not completely guaranteed. That's why instead of changing queens, let's take the pawn first, and now suddenly my 2 pawns become connected passed pawns, which is a huge advantage in the ending. His king goes from g4 to g3. Why? Because he wants to avoid some checks that he feels are dangerous. But this doesn't change so much. Queen goes to g6, check. Queen goes to g4. And now that I have the corrected passed pawns, it's ready to start exchanging. Queen takes queen, king takes queen. And now that we are queenless and we have same colored bishops and they have connected passed pawns, time to start pushing the passed pawns. c6 to c5, my bishop controls the square, so if my opponent's bishop takes my pawn, I take the bishop, and now this pawn can very easily promote. The king tries to bring to come near my side, my opponent's king. Pawn goes to b5, continuing pushing the pawns. King goes now to a2, pawn goes to b4, king goes to d3. Bishop goes now to d4. What I want to avoid is perhaps a loss of a pawn. I might end up losing this pawn here. But of course, even if this happens, then my opponent will take the king after the bishop disappears, and this pawn would directly go down and get promoted. But to avoid even this possibility, bishop goes to d4. King goes to c4. Now my king starts approaching, goes to h6. You see the evaluation bar at this point is becoming heavier and heavier for me. Now it is more than the rook, more than the 5 pawns of the rook. Opponent pushes the pawn from g2 to g4. No danger for me because I have my g and h pawns that can block these two. My king goes to g5. Cannot go to f5 any longer, but all it needs is one more move to go where it wants. And finally, my opponent pushes the bishop from d6 to c7. At this time, we were playing for almost 3 hours. All of the games get ended. The tournament director came to the table and was watching us. And then my opponent's clock went down to 0.00, and the tournament director immediately stopped the game. This was a win for me for number 2. And now let's see the review. Let's see what does chess.com, the computer, think about the game. You see the evaluation bar went a little up and down, meaning until here it was even. Then when I grab this pawn on d4, I start having advantage. I lose my advantage, gain it, lose it a few times, and only finally after, I believe, around move 30, when my opponent made a mistake on move 31 to push his pawn from e4 to e5, I was winning all the time. Andrew did a great job. You see, no matter how many times he was down, he continued fighting with very dangerous threats that I was barely able to escape, coming back to zero quite a few times to an even game, and using all of his time, all of his 90 minutes, trying to see how to react. What does the computer think? First of all, Andrew had accuracy of 80.3%. I had 83.7%, a little bit better. Rating, guess the ELO. Andrew, the computer thinks that his ELO is 2000 and mine is 2200. For both of us, it's way above our current ratings. For me, 2200 is enormous. I doubt in real life I'd ever reach that rating. No brilliant moves, one great move for each of us, 22 best. I had one more excellent than Andrew, 5 goods. Andrew had one more book move. We both had some mistakes and many misses, but Andrew had 3 blunders. I had none of them. After yesterday's game, in round number 2, I'm in the middle, 1 win and 1 loss. Round number 3 is this coming Friday, June 6th. I'm going to cover it for you. In the meantime, there are some other videos I'd like to upload. Thanks for watching. This is Karela Saniziris, Greco Chess Channel. Good night.